So for week 7, I apologize, or not week 7, chapter 7. I apologize for taking forever to get this video up, but I talked way too much for my first stab at it, and I want to keep it concise and keep it simple so that way I don't bore you guys to death and I don't go over my 15-minute YouTube limit. So we're going to get right down to business, and there are two things that I want to show you because they are going to be on your test. It's going to be a part of your test, and I think it'll be simple, so don't fret too much about it. But the reason that I want to bring these things to your attention, especially the first part, is because it applies directly to how you might use a geographic information system in a real workplace. And it doesn't necessarily have to be using ArcMap. You could be using AutoCAD, SmallWorld GIS, the Carlson software. Again, it's about your end user and what they want to see and how they're going to view it. And that your text says that they've taught you to do dynamic labeling, which you have because the labels change as the information and the data change in your tables in the database. But I like to think of static and dynamic labeling in two different environments. And the first environment is what you all have learned to do in these exercises for Chapter 7, which is where your end user looks at a printed map or a static image like a screenshot. So you're able to maneuver the labels and turn them into things that you can change and move however you want them to. They don't necessarily have to be tied to the geographic feature. And you make a clean, finished product that you can see everything, and it just looks a whole lot more organized and nice. And what you would need to know for your test is I'm going to have you make a map, and you're going to have to take into consideration, okay, am I sending this map into someone as a printed copy that they're going to have as a discussion piece at a meeting or hang up on a wall, or am I going to put this in a different environment, which is the second part of the difference I consider between static and dynamic. Would you consider a web environment or an interactive environment? And you need to know, you need to be thinking about that just like you would your end user for colors or information that you put on the map. You also want to label it and set the file up to where if it prints off, it looks nice, clean, and organized. But if it's not going to be printed off and you want it to be as detailed as possible for a web environment or an interactive environment, for example, someone else using ArcMap, then you want to differentiate between those two situations. And the text and your examples, I know your exercises, have given you examples of what you might do in the former situation, which is the static printout physical environment map. But like I'm going to show here, they go into a little bit of detail of showing you this labeling toolbar that you can bring up. But real quick, what you can do for something that's much more appropriate for a web or an interactive environment is to use this Maplex label engine. It used to be an expensive add-on that you had to buy, but they have included it in the base software now. And these principles apply to, again, any software, any map making or cartographic principles. It's always good to consider. So what I mean by that is, if let's turn it off for a second, and it's going to tell me that I lose some of my labels, and that's okay. So I'm going to see if it'll redraw them, and it won't. But if I go into my label manager, you have all the examples and options that you had in your exercises in your text. But if you change and switch it on, you'll notice that it's a little different, and you have some more options. So if you go and you select which layer that you want to mess with the labels on, you go to properties, you have all these different label position options, fitting strategies, how dense you want your labels to be in terms of repetition, whether you want the largest part of the feature to be labeled first, like if there's two parts of it, as well as conflict resolution in regard to the other labels. Now that's maybe some more advanced stuff, but just an example of how useful this can be. The default setting typically is that your labels can overrun their features. And if you have that set on, let's say again you're in an interactive web situation, and you have all these labels repeating, and they're on small little islands off the coast that maybe you don't care about, or maybe you think that looks bad, or it's just making the map run too slow if it's running off of a server. Well, you can go in and use the label manager. Again, it's just this first little tag on the labeling bar. Check out the properties, placement properties. And under fitting strategy, you can turn off overrun feature. Say OK, apply, and you'll notice they're gone. Well, they're not gone so much as they're just not going to draw if the font and the font size that you have set overrun the boundaries of that feature. So if you're interacting with it on a website, or if someone else is using your program or your computer, then it's going to make the labels a lot cleaner and more professional in this interactive setting. So that's something I want you to play with. Again, the testable material out of that is just consideration for, is this an interactive web type situation, or is it something I need to print out for somebody that needs to be clear and organized for a one-time viewing. The next thing I want to show you is more of a trick, and you don't have to know any coding or anything. I do want you to know this for your test, and only because it's something really simple. It's something that you can, if you know it and you get used to using it, you can always put it in your tool bag and have it when you need it. Now you can get to this, what you're going to label, it's just like in your text, either by going to the label manager, that's right here, and you can click expression. But if you would prefer the way the book did it, you just go to the label properties for whatever layer you're going to go to, and you hit expression. So I've mentioned, and the book has mentioned also, that geographic information systems thrive on data. But sometimes, regardless of whether you're in a dynamic or a static environment for map presentation, you want to have more than one set of information on your label. And it might be, this might not be the best example, but let's say you needed to have the name of the country or the state that you were looking at, but you also wanted to have the population. Well, if you just click in the expression area and use the and symbol, and then tell it, okay, I need the pop here, I need the population. You hit OK, you hit apply. Now you can see all states have the name as well as a population number, but that doesn't look very good. So you can come in, and again, with very little knowledge of programming, you don't have to be intimidated by it. You can say, okay, well, I also want to include a colon, and anything that is not part of the data that you just want to put in there, you put in parentheses. So I want to add a colon, and I want to have some spaces on the end of that. And then, so you have included that. That's what the first and is for. So I want the admin name and some space, colon, space, but then you also want to include this population again. So you tell it and then you hit OK. Hit apply, and now it says this is Quintana Roo, and you have the little bit more organized, professional looking colon there, and it's the population is 536,599. Now if you wanted to have that information, but you didn't want to have to mess with the colon, or let's say you wanted a country name, but you wanted it on the next line. If you don't want things to follow in a concatenating format, means one right after the other, you can use this trick, which is just a little bit of coding. You use the and symbol, and with no spaces, you type VB new line, NEWLINE, and then close it off with another and sign. And what that's going to do is that's going to tell the parser, the expression parser, to put the admin name, create a new line, and then put the country name or whatever field you want to put under it right below that. So now it tells you Quintana Roo, and then you have Mexico under it. And you could set that up any way you wanted to. Like if you want to make these a little bigger, you go tell it, well, this needs to be 14. I want it to be black so I can see it better. And in expression, you can also add, when it starts with a new line, you can say, I want to add country name, and then you add your and symbol in there. Whoops, it told me no, can't do that. New line. Sorry, I had one too many ands in there. So now, because you've separated the new line, and then you also added your country name, it looks a little bit better. So you can divide this up however you want to, and I'd like you to try to do that on your test, and there will be some more information about that when the test becomes available. But those are the two tricks that I wanted to show you, or the few tricks I wanted to show you for how you could use a little bit of basic programming to manipulate your labels and show more information from the data tables on your maps, and also to get you thinking about the two different kinds of environments that you might have to differentiate how you label. If anybody has any questions or concerns, as always, just shoot me an email and I'll follow up with you. Otherwise, I'll get to grading your homework, and then this weekend I will make the test available, which I have most of it finished, so I hope it's not too much. I think you guys will hopefully prefer this over just a really generic 50 multiple choice question deal. But like I said, just let me know if you have any questions, and stay safe if you're out in this really icy weather.